Going inside the issues of our community, this is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Last week, community leaders gathered at the Freedom Center for the release of the biennial report card on intergroup relations in our region, sponsored by Bridges for Just Community. This effort grew out of a response to the civil unrest of 2001, but unlike its predecessor reports in 2004 and 6, cast a wider net to look not only at black and white relations, but at the way Hispanics, Muslims, gays and lesbians, and Asian Americans interact in the community. Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. Understanding the human dynamics of our region, how people of different races, ethnicities, religions, and sexual orientations interact could be seen as nothing more than an academic exercise. But the future of our region in a fiercely competitive global economy depends on attracting the most talented young people to choose for themselves to make Greater Cincinnati the place they want to work and create lives. This report opens with a response of an African-American gay male to the question of whether or not he will stay in Cincinnati. He said, "For a while, I would have said I'm going to move to Chicago. Last year, it was Manhattan. The year before, it was San Francisco, but I feel like there's an opportunity for me to contribute and create change here, and I am all about that." Without the ability to attract and retain the most talented, Cincinnati will stagnate and decline. This report, along with other recent reports like Cincinnati in Black and White and Striving Together, are critical if we want to be proactive in shaping our future and not just letting the future happen to us. To discuss this report, I am joined this morning by Gary Wright, a demographic consultant with Wright Futures. Gary coordinated the study. Maria Molina, the Director of Multicultural Business Development for Procter & Gamble. Shakila Ahmad, the Vice Chair of the Board of Bridges for a Just Community and an active member of the Islamic Center of Greater Cincinnati in Westchester. Welcome to everybody. Several people, Gary and Shakila, have been on multiple times. Maria, you were, I guess, a somewhat frequent visitor with our Hispanic show.
And a big fan.
And a big fan, so thank you for being here this morning. This is a very interesting report, and I think one of the most surprising things, Gary, is that it shifts what people are telling you about what their top priorities are. And let's take a look at sort of that top line thing. We have some statistic here. One of the most dramatic findings of this study is a shift in the top priority of the respondents. In 2003, the number one concern on people's minds was race relations. 22% ranked it as their top concern. In the fall of 2007, only 5% ranked race relations as their number one concern. In 2003, crime and public safety, police issues, was ranked as 16% as their top concern. In the report that was, this report, that soared to 38%, far and away the number one concern. Gary, what does this tell us, this shift in priorities?
Well, I think it tells us two things. First of all, that back in 2003, the city and the region were still wrestling with the issues that have been raised by the racial unrest in 2001, specifically issues of black-white relations and police relations with the African American community. Now, over time, what's happened is that has simply become less of a priority to those two groups than it was back then, and that's not too surprising. It doesn't mean that people don't care about race relations anymore. What it does mean is other issues, the economy and crime, are more important top-of-mind issues today. Crime, I think, the increase in interest in crime as a top issue actually is not driven by an increase in the crime rate. We think it's actually driven by an increase in media coverage last fall with the campaigns on the jail, city council campaign, and then ultimately media coverage of other global crimes.
So you were doing the data gathering last fall when those campaigns were going on, and that was just out in the public with all these commercials, and that was influencing it?
I think it definitely was. We were in the field just after that from mid-November until early January.
Maria, how does this big flip, is this what you expected? Are you surprised by this, this major shift in priorities?
No, for the reasons that Gary mentioned. I mean, there are other things that are top of mind for our community right now, including the economy, etc. But for our Hispanic community, our growing Hispanic community, safety and police relations is still top of mind, and is something that must not be overlooked. This is a growing community. It's where the 49% of the growth, the regional growth is, and Hispanics are still, while they're feeling better in some areas, like at the store, in some areas, when it comes to being out in the community, out driving, etc., there's still some issues to us, or to the growing Hispanic community, to the new immigrants, that cannot be overlooked.
And we'll come back and take some look at specific data on that
Yes.
as we go along. Shakila, you're a vice chair at Bridges for a Just Community.
Yes.
And a lot of Bridges programming has been focused, I think, in the past 7-8 years, and actually much longer than that, on the question of the racial divides in the community. What does this perhaps do in terms of reorienting the priorities of your organization? Because you're the sponsor of this report, will you try to adjust the programming that you do?
Well, I think, we're in a constant adjustment with Bridges in terms of making sure that all aspects of the vision of inclusion, equity, and justice are met. And one of the core principles of Bridges, as founded originally, was, interfaith. And so some of these issues that have been raised in this report really allows us to realize, some of the original reasons for an organization such as ours being founded haven't gone away, and that we cannot forget, though there are crises that need to be addressed as situations arise, is that many of the principles that we need to focus on, whether it's ethnicity, whether it's religion, whether it's the other demographics that have been addressed by this report. I'm very pleased that we took the initiative, we looked at it, and we realized that we have work to do.
Gary, going back to the data itself, you were gathering this data, I take it, with the Institute for Policy Research at the University of Cincinnati.
Yes.
And you were gathering it last fall. Would this data be different if we were gathering it right now, particularly not just in the crime area, but also one of the things I found very interesting was where the priority about the economy was. It was ranked number 2, but at 16%, and was in a long decline in terms of its importance. I wonder if that really would have turned around by this time.
I think it would have. I think the thing that wouldn't have changed, however, is that race relations as top issues still wouldn't be the top. But I think you'd see the economy be more prominent now than crime. But it's a little bit of speculation,
Right, but with the housing crisis, the general economic slowdown, and now we've got a presidential race that is stressing the economy. So I want to make the point that these numbers
Yes.
are fluid. They're
Yes.
a
They are
snapshot.
fluid, absolutely.
Yes.
And you have to be sensitive to that. The other thing that I'd like to ask on that, you were asking about racial interrelations, sexual orientation, gays and lesbians, various religious groups. One thing I didn't see here was where economics and poverty fit into this, because that cuts across all these other definitions. And I really wonder sometimes if that doesn't influence a lot more than we try to measure, or we focus too much on these kinds of divides.
Well, what I would say is, there are definitely the whole issue of economic status cuts through all of this and very, very deeply. You spoke earlier about the need of this economy actually to be competitive and attract immigrants. Well, there's 2 kinds of immigrants we're attracting and that we need. One are scientists, engineers, physicians, professionals from all over the world, especially these days from Asia, but not only from Asia, who bring talents that we really need. Mm-hmm. And my family actually is an immigrant family, and my father was recruited as an aerospace engineer who helped put Americans on the moon, and we both benefited from that. Well, immigrants today in those specialties don't look like me. And the second part of that is we also need, and there's also a demand for people who work in construction, who work in food processing and agriculture, and those people are largely from Mexico and Central America. So there's divides that way. There's certainly divides within the African American community. There are tons of divisions that are very, very important.
If I may build on that, Dan, I am Cuban American, and my family and I have been here since 1969. We're into the third generation, and I work for Procter & Gamble, where we attract a lot of talent. And you mentioned the multicultural division. We need more people that look like me at Procter & Gamble so that we can concentrate on the growing Hispanic community and consumer. You mentioned the economy. Something that came out during this survey, yet again, is that education is the equalizer for everything. People that actually went on to receive a college education were more likely than others to know people that were different than them. So at the heart of it all, the more educated workforce and the more education opportunities that everyone has, the greater the economic impact and growth of diversity.
You know, one of the things that I think with what you're just saying and P&G and some of the larger corporations, I think are some of the most diverse places in our community inside. But Gary, by revealing that you're a second generation immigrant.
I'm first, actually.
You're first?
Yes.
Okay. So and you're first. And
I'm technically first because I'm a naturalized American citizen.
Here's the interesting thing to me. Gary, you said in the meeting when this was announced, I think you were the one who said this, that the immigration to our community is gaining, and it's just we're a little bit slower than Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and other places, but it's coming, and it will come in huge numbers. As a historian, my reaction to that was maybe not, because Cincinnati basically lost out on the second wave of immigration between 1880 and 1914, and we ended up in the backwater. And we've been in a long decline because immigrants did not come to this community. I think we're dangerously out of touch with the American
And wouldn't
experience.
it be sad if history repeated itself?
And that's what I'm saying. We may want to presume that this talent is going to come to us, but it doesn't necessarily have to. People will go where the jobs are and the opportunities are.
People will go where the jobs are, and people will also go where they can feel comfortable in raising their family. They feel that they can contribute to the society and the community with all of what they have to offer. The richness of their ethnic cultures and traditions and foods and languages, and you know, and be able to practice their faith freely and be able to be welcomed into the greater community. And you know, and technically I also am an immigrant because I came here at a very young age and so was naturalized here. And so, you know, it is very important for those immigrant communities to obviously bring skills and talents, whether it be on the white collar professional or while in the, you know, blue collar working areas, but at the same time the community has to have something to offer to them for both of them to benefit for being here.
Dan, if I may make two more points. Working at Procter & Gamble, I will tell you, and you too in previous career, we get what we measure. What makes me terribly proud to be part of the Bridges Executive Board is that Bridges in 2006 was the first one to expand this kind of study to include beyond black and white. At Procter & Gamble, you mentioned my work with the multicultural division. It is located in our corporate headquarters here in Cincinnati. We need to attract and keep that young talent if we're going to be able to serve our consumers. And it's more than feeling diverse at the office. It's for young professionals to be able to go out and really experience the cultural experience broadly.
I want to put up some data about the Hispanic situation and Hispanic attitudes. And the data here is particularly interesting in my mind. In 2004, the Hispanic community ranked race relations, and this is a cluster of what this means, at 19%. 19% ranked it as their number one choice. In 2007, that falls to 14%. But when they look at police relations, 2004, 2% ranked as their #1 concern. But in 2007, that had jumped to 9%. Now, 9% in itself doesn't sound like a whole lot, but that's a huge jump. I'll come back to the other piece of the data on that in a minute. What does that tell you about what do you think the reality is for the Hispanic community with that police relations question?
If I may, and you're
first,
really
and I'll go.
deeply
Okay.
embedded in the report, it's really a reality check and a confirmation of what's been happening with the whole issue on immigration. And sadly, with how that has impacted locally in places like Butler County. I can tell you this because I'm out there in the community, and I can tell you that that's the impact you're looking at. The racial profiling that is going on is it's so sad, and it's one of the reasons why this is happening.
And it's not just the reality, it's the perception, like you were saying, Shakila. It's how people
Absolutely.
feel about things, not just the data about police stops.
Well,
and all
it's
of
the
that.
data, I think, but Maria is also, when you talk, there is a divide in the Hispanic community between recent Mexicans and Central Americans who are many of whom are undocumented, at least some are undocumented, and the rest of the community. And what I'm hearing when I talk to people one-on-one is that they're being profiled and stopped by the police. There was a young man who I spoke to who was worked in Westchester. He said he was stopped 8 times by the Westchester police in 1 year, was never given a citation. And the reason clearly was that they were stopping to harass him because he appeared to be Mexican. Turns out he wasn't, but he appeared to be.
Gary, one more thing. It sadly is happening to Hispanics who, like me, have been here for many years. And, there's no reason to believe that are undocumented.
I do, and I think I've said this on air before, but I want to say it again. I had an experience about a year and a half ago with a Guatemalan father with 3 children who broke down. His car broke down, and I pulled over to help. 3 Cincinnati, this was in the city of Cincinnati, 3 Cincinnati police officers came and never harassed him, never asked for identification, helped him get his car to a safe place and take care of those children. I was really impressed by the treatment the city of Cincinnati police.
That's
so this
wonderful.
is not about police
No, it's not.
necessarily.
And it's not about all police in every city,
Right.
but the fact that that's 1 in 10 Hispanics asked what was the most important issue in the region. They could have said the economy, I can't find a job. They could have said crime like everybody else, but 1 in 10, the most important issue in the whole region was in fact police relations to them.
I know I'm going long. I'm going to signal that to my director, but I want to ask one more question, and that is about the Muslim community. One of the aspects of this report is how much contact and interaction people are having, and the Muslim community is one of the communities that there isn't there's some concern about how much contact there is. What's your takeaway from that on that question?
Well, the study, one of the key findings is that the Muslim community is the most distant from the rest of the greater community, and the numbers were twice that of the next community, which is distant, which was the Asian community. And I think it's significant for a couple of reasons, in the sense that, and it's a two-way street, in the sense that the greater community either does not know or has more so a negative view of the Muslim Americans that are their neighbors. And then at the same time, the Muslim community is then disconnected from some of the issues that affect all of us, and maybe are not then as engaged as they could be and need to be. And I think there's a number of reasons that contribute to that. I mean,
and I'm out of time, but here's what I want to conclude with that, is that you and the people at the Islamic Center are incredibly welcoming, and if people want to know something, there are opportunities to go out and
opportunities,
visit.
and we have to all make an effort in order to develop those partnerships to make it different.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for doing this report, and let's make sure this doesn't just stay on some shelf, but people act on this.
And
Thanks,
thank you
Dan.
for helping us with that.
Stay tuned after the break. Some folks who push their push their own bodies to the limit. The One World Triathlon comes to Cincinnati. Are you ready? Traditionally, summertime in Cincinnati has meant lazy afternoons in the backyard or at the park, intense baseball games pitting one neighborhood team against another, or a trip on the Island Queen upriver to Coney Island for an afternoon of roller coasters, romantic trips on the Lost River, and a chance to cool off at Sunlight Pool. And before the permanent high-lift dams were built, locals flocked to the beaches of Bellevue and Dayton, Kentucky, for picnics and swims in the Ohio River to fight the heat and humidity. In recent years, new summertime activities like Paddle Fest have emerged. And this summer, for the first time, Cincinnati will host the greatest athletic contest of all, a triathlon. Welcome back. I'm joined now, two triathletes, by Monica Wittig, who is a triathlete, but also a mother and an accountant, and Jonathan Grinder, who is the race director of the One World Triathlon here in Cincinnati. And Jonathan is by background an attorney and a historian, so he's got to be basically good and sound. So welcome to Newsmakers. Jonathan, this is pretty exciting to bring a triathlon here. What did you have to overcome? What did you have to convince people that this was a good idea?
You know, interesting question. I didn't have to convince anybody in Cincinnati to do it. They embraced it. The athletes were had a little trepidation about swimming in the Ohio River, but you know, I think that everybody's willing to give it a try, and we're going to have a great race.
Monica, you've run, I guess it's not just run, you've participated.
Swim, bike, and run.
Yeah, in triathlons before,
Yes.
so several you said.
Yes.
What's your feeling about swimming in the Ohio River?
I think it's a great opportunity for triathletes. You have the current, which you swim downstream, so you have the aid and the assistance of the current, so it makes for a better swim and gives you a quicker swim time.
Something that was being talked about, I have to be honest with you, in the newsroom when people heard this morning what I was doing, was people said, swimming in the Ohio River, is this safe? Both from a health point of view, but also, is this sending a safe message to people about swimming in the Ohio River? Let's deal with the health thing first.
Well, we're working very, very closely with Orsanco, which is they test water quality on the
Ohio
river.
River Sanitation Commission.
Right, up and down the river from practically Pittsburgh all the way down to Louisville. And they're going to monitor the water for us, and we are going to make sure that if we put an athlete in the water is 100% safe. But what I think a lot of people don't realize is that the water in the Ohio River is safe to swim in about 95% of the time, and the only time it's really not is if there's been a lot of rain, and that can wash some debris into the river and increase the bacteria count. But in most occasions, the water is 100%
I have
quality.
to say, I use this footage from the 1930s. The river was a real problem then, even though people didn't understand it today. That's all been cleaned up because of Orsanco and other agencies that have put it in. What about, just tell me what a triathlon is. What exactly do you do here?
Well, you start with the swim, and then
How long?
there's two different distances at this race. There'd be a 750-meter swim,
Actually, it's a little shorter. It's
okay.
300 meters for the non-swimmers.
and then two laps of that or would it be
It's
600?
downstream swim, 1,500 meters is our long swim, and then our sprint race is a 300 swim. So it's really not too long.
And then you get out of the water and then you go to the bikes. 40 kilometers, 20 for the sprint. Now 40 kilometers, for us Americans, what's that translate to? How long?
24.8 miles.
24.8 miles,
Right.
a casual ride. And then a run, a 10-kilometer run or a 5-kilometer run. So how long are you supposed to, for a good athlete, how long does this take?
For the longer distance race.
For the longer distance race.
A man would probably do it in about 2:20 to 2:30, 2 hours and 30 minutes.
That quick?
Yes, and then for a woman my age, probably about 2:45 to 2:50, something like that.
That's that's actually very quick in my mind. The reality here is we're going to put up the information about signing up for this in just a few minutes here, but what should an athlete, how good an athlete should you be before you consider, somebody like me doesn't go out there and do this. How much prep here?
Well, and that's one of the things that we'd like to encourage people to come out and try the triathlon. There really is no particular level of preparation. If you're a fit athlete and like to go out and bike ride on a Sunday afternoon and maybe go for a jog in the mornings, you're really ready for a triathlon. And that's why we offer two distances.
Okay.
If you're not a confident swimmer, come try the sprint triathlon. It's only 300-meter swim. We have people from age 12 to age 80 in the race, and
wow.
everybody in between, and there's really nobody who can't do this event.
Let me make sure people have the information. Now, only 1,200 athletes can register for the One World Triathlon. So if you're interested, go to the website, www.cincinnatitriathlon.com. You can blog about the event there, and you can get all sorts of information. Thank you for being here, and so people should sign up now so they don't get squeezed out.
Right.
And keep practicing and make Cami really work. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week. Have a good week. Very good.